Financial Survival Network, helping you survive and thrive in the new economy. Go to CarrieLutz.com and sign up for 30 free micro trainings on financial survival.
$14.90 WGCH. This is Carrie Lutz. You're listening to the Financial Survival Network. With me now, Ranting Andy Hoffman for our Monday session. And one of those questions that I think about during the year, especially during the holidays, is why is this raid different from all the others? What do you think, Andy?
You mean like the 4 questions?
Yeah, I think kind of. I'm always asking questions. You know that.
Well, look, I mean, we'll go into why, what's going on in the world in a second. But all you have to do is look at the Dow being held at an exactly, 1.0% decline for most of the day, while basically most of Europe is down 3% or more. Belgium's down 5%. Amsterdam is down 4%. The Russian market was closed, and we're hitting new. I don't know if it's all-time lows for Spain, but it's certainly blowing through, the 2008, 2009 lows. So, they're trying to keep precious metals down. Gold is coming back now, so they're just fighting harder, with the thinner silver market and the mining shares, of course, which are pretty much hopeless. And, what I believe now is we are seeing the beginning of global meltdown 3. Part 1 was in 2008. Part 2 was last summer and fall. And this is going to be the big one, as I call it, because there is no way they're going to be able to print their way out of this one. We're going to have social unrest all over Europe. We're going to have countries that are either kicked out or volunteer to leave the European Union. And the situation in the Far East and even the emerging economies is now deteriorating as much as you're seeing in the core of Europe.
Yeah, and the so-called healthy countries are going down the tubes with the unhealthy countries, because in the final analysis, all of their fates are tied together.
Yeah, and there are no more healthy countries. It's funny how people call Germany healthy. I'm just writing a piece today. They're projecting less than 1% GDP growth, but in the context of Europe, that's considered strong. And they're tied with Italy of all countries for the third most indebted on Earth after the United States and Japan. So there's nothing fantastic going on there. In fact, the only positive that's going on in Germany is that all the money that's fleeing the pigs is going into Germany. So it's kind of, creating a liquidity effect over there. But as far as their economy, if you look at the numbers, they're declining just as rapidly as everyone else. And I'd be shocked if they can keep in positive GDP land this year.
Yeah, and GDP is really an irrelevancy anyway, because it doesn't measure wealth creation. It measures consumption, and it measures credit effects. It doesn't say, all right, wealth creation in terms of this money, this wealth was created from production, this was created from new innovations, from patents, whatever. All it does is measure total activity, which more and more is reliant upon massive debt creation.
Yeah, and it measures nominal activity. So it doesn't even measure real gains. And as we know, almost every country is understating inflation. In fact, it was funny. I was looking at India. India is projecting 7% GDP growth this year, but they are also publishing that they have 10% inflation. So they're admitting it, unlike the U.S., which lies about inflation. Now, in China is the ultimate in unproductive GDP, because they're building, the equivalent of bridges to nowhere, ghost cities. They have a historic real estate / construction bubble that's bursting as we speak, and they can report whatever GDP number they want. But the fact is they're having record inflation, they're having huge unemployment, social unrest, and I think that's going to bubble over soon. I think by the end of this year, if there was any remaining people on Earth who believed that there was some kind of decoupling, they're going to be gone, because China is going to crash as brutally and as harshly with as bad government ramifications as anything you'll see anywhere on Earth.
Yeah, I'm totally in agreement with you, because getting back to inflation, GDP growth, whatever it measures, and somehow it's perceived as being a real positive, which it isn't. What we have here is inflation. The actual rate of inflation is much higher than the stated rate of inflation. when you factor in the actual rate of inflation, the U.S. economy is contracting at least 5% per year just on the basis of phony GDP calculations, much higher if you dig beyond the numbers and get rid of government employment and other false productivity measures. So the fact is this contraction continues unabated and with no end in sight, and it's happening in every country in the world, regardless if you call them bricks or pigs or any other farm animal that you could think of. We're seeing a global contraction, which is the definition of a depression. Everybody gets poorer in a depression.
Well, if we had positive GDP growth here in the States, then why do we have record deficits of trade deficits, budget deficits, you name it? I mean, so if you're making products that people are buying, then theoretically you should be getting money for them. But the money's leaving the country at record rates. In fact, I just saw something this morning that said that they're going to report later this week GDP for the first quarter. Someone raised their GDP estimate from like 1.8 to 2.5 because they reported last week that the trade deficit went down. And the reason it went down is because of plunging U.S. demand. And again, when you look at the oil demand in the United States is down something like 15% in the last year, which is unheard of. I mean, oil analysts, I don't know if it's ever fallen 1 or 2%. It's down something like 10 or 15% in the last year. And still you have record gasoline prices here and everywhere else. So, all these numbers with GDP are just a sham. I think it's pretty clear to just about anyone. And you'll see in my piece tomorrow that the only markets that are even that haven't plummeted are the ones that can print the most money and manipulate the market the most, because everything else is in free fall right now.
But eventually all that manipulation comes to an end, and then the final crash is far worse than anything anyone could have ever imagined. And that's what's going to happen here. So buckle your seatbelts and put on your child restraints and just get ready for it.
And it's happened so many times in history. That's the sad thing. I mean, never on a global basis like this, when you have, half dozen nations with nuclear capability and the 7 billion people in the world versus 1 billion or 2 billion when some of these other times it happened. But I mean, we're talking about hyperinflation that's happened so many times in history. Governments never learn. And every single one of these times, we're talking about it's going to be so bad now. But the same thing happened in France with John Law. It happened in Zimbabwe. It happened in Germany. It happened in China numerous times. It happened in the United States. People lost everything. And the same thing is going to happen here just on a global basis. I fear for what's coming, and I hope and pray that people think long and hard about protecting themselves as best they can before this occurs. Because if the Eurozone breaks this year, you're going to see the symptoms of this reverberating around the world very quickly.
Oh, absolutely. And the other thing I mentioned to you is I went to the End the Fed Ron Paul rally in Philadelphia over the weekend. And obviously, Ron Paul doesn't have a chance unless this collapse occurs in advance of the election. And obviously, what's being attempted by the government now is to put that collapse off till after the election, so one of the two identical candidates can get elected. But they're losing control over the whole thing. And like you said, it's just going to come tumbling down.
Yeah, it's been my contention for a long time that Ron Paul's only chance would be, as you said, if everything collapsed before the election. But, if it did, well, that word collapse it's kind of a vague term. But when you think of what it really means, if you had true currency declines and social unrest around the world, it's hard to believe you wouldn't see draconian actions from the top of governments such as here. It's just hard to believe that a lone freedom fighter like Ron Paul, let alone at 77 years old, would ever get a chance to be president in this environment, let alone to get anything done. I mean, I've always thought even if he wasn't, became president somehow, the changes are going to be after his time. We can at best hope from him that he just presents the United States with a good diplomatic front, because there's so much hatred of America. People around the world are going to blame America for all these problems, as they should, because we created this dollar-based system and we abused it. I mean, everyone else helped along the way, but essentially we're the ringleader. We're going to be the scapegoat.
Yep, absolutely. It's going to be pile on, and they're going to just totally neglect their own complicity in the whole scam, because we started the scam. Actually, the English started it. We just continued it. And like all scams, just like Bernie Madoff, eventually the music stops and you're out of chairs and somebody's left standing up, and it's going to be us. Anyway, and milesfranklin.com, your blog, what's the topic again?
Oh, well, today's topic that's coming out, I got to even remember what it's called. Yeah, it's called the Cartel Herald. But tomorrow I'm going to do this piece where I'm going to compare all the markets of the world. And people are going to realize just how bad the situation is. You really just cannot look at the Dow Jones propaganda average. And I think it's going to all be moot anyway, given what we're seeing now. I believe the end of the European Union is going to occur by the end of this year.
If not sooner. And sooner or later, as in next Monday, we will talk again. And
great. Have a great week.
You be well. Bye.
Bye.